SpiceWorld 2019 in Austin, Texas, where they have, I'm hearing, a little bit longer run of summer. It's in the upper 90s outside, so better than the cold monsoon back in Seattle. And I am back with Peter Tsai. It's our annual chit chat, sir.
It is. Good to see you here.
Yeah.
I'm glad you could join us for SpiceWorld.
Yep, and I'll tell you, I even brought a little costume. I'm not wearing it on air, but I'll wear it to tonight's party. So I'm trying to fit into your culture with the
looking forward to
costumes and so on. So as usual, you've released the State of the IT report, and I have a couple questions up front, then maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the report.
Yeah, sure, that sounds great.
So you talked about your research shows that a 44% increase in IT spend is forecast for next year?
Well, yeah, 44% of businesses we talked to said that they plan to increase their budgets in 2020. And on average, it's about a 14% increase among those that are raising their budgets.
Right. And it offhand, that struck me, and I appreciate the research you do, but it kind of struck me with some of the headwinds that we're starting to hear about with tariffs and just the economic cycle is hitting 12 years of growth. Does that number seem fair to you?
Well, yeah, only 8% of companies said they plan to shrink their budgets.
Okay.
And then this survey was fielded a few months ago when maybe some of those economic trade winds, as you call them, weren't so much in the public eye. And companies tend to plan their budgets a little bit earlier in advance. So at the time, they were feeling pretty optimistic. And I'm not sure if it's changed much since then, but they've already budgeted for this in the next year.
Fair enough. So another interesting point was in January of 2020, we come up on end of support for Win 7, I believe, 08 Server, and one or two other nefarious Microsoft products. Right. But what was interesting is that on the desktop front, so of the spend categories, upgrades and replacements apparently was number one, and cybersecurity number two. Right. And let's talk about that. Do you feel a function of people are starting to prepare for the eventual replacement of Windows 7?
For sure. So yeah, Windows end of life in January of 2020 for Windows 7 and Server 2008 and R2 is definitely contributing to some of the budgeting. A lot of people said that end of life is definitely contributing to budget increases when we explicitly asked them about that.
Yeah.
Also refresh cycles, this would naturally be a part of, and then of course security plays into the need to upgrade and move away from unsupported operating systems. So all three of those were significant factors in why budgets are increasing. So we can obviously point back to the Windows end of life.
Yeah, and I think maybe the final point I want to make, and then I want to hear more about your study, is that the of your community and the respondents, 72% or so of the people have at least a single instance of a Windows 7 device.
Right, so Windows 7, probably one of the most popular Windows instances out there in the world. A lot of people have upgraded to Windows 10 already. Microsoft had the free upgrade for many businesses. Right. But there's a lot of legacy systems and some legacy software that doesn't necessarily work really well with Windows 10. So there might be a lot of companies that are primarily on Windows 10 or maybe Windows Server 2012 or 2016, but they still have that one server somewhere in the back of the closet running an older OS, and the same might go for some client software that they can't get rid of because it's a legacy device. So it's very common among companies out there to have at least one system out there on an older OS.
Yeah, no, I get it. I've done all the talking as usual, so are there other highlights of the study? I've put a link below in the blog for people to go get it. So what else is news?
Oh, sure. So also in part of the survey, we asked about emerging technologies and how companies plan to adopt them. So in the future, we found that adoption within the next 2 years of certain technologies, such as artificial intelligence and edge computing, they'll either double or triple. So the expected adoption rate will double or triple for those. Additionally, a lot of companies are excited about 5G wireless technology. So a lot of them are trying to adopt that as soon as it's available in their area. So we see significant growth among that technology as well.
Well, and so let's talk about that, because your study unabashedly so talked about the enterprise level. I didn't see as much of the keywords I like, SMB and MSP, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But with these technologies that are, I mean, quite frankly, AI and 5G are cutting edge. So you go on to say it starts at the enterprise level.
Right. So adoption in enterprises is usually higher for emerging technologies because they have more resources, they have the manpower to test these technologies and to evaluate new solutions, and the money to buy it. But one of the great things about the Spiceworks research is that we talk to companies of all sizes, and because a lot of the Spiceworks audience is in smaller companies, we actually, of the 1,000+ respondents that we had, more than half of them were from small and medium businesses. So when we're talking about this data in general, it's very representative of the audience as a whole. And if you go to the research, you can actually filter the data by company size.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so you can see a lot of these trends for the smallest of businesses, say under 100 employees, or if you just want to look at mid-sized businesses, say between 100 and 500 people, you can do that as well. Or you can look at enterprises or even the largest enterprises with 5,000 and more employees. So you can look at different cuts of the data to see if you can pull out any trends there. But in general, the larger companies are more optimistic about these emerging technologies because they have a lot to gain by adopting them, and they have, frankly, the resources to buy these technologies while they're still kind of cutting edge.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then you were telling me off camera, but I'll let you tell me on camera that you're not forgetting about our beloved SMB MSPs. This study, quite frankly, had more of an enterprise conversation, but you're saying there are other studies where you give us a love tap and a wink and a nod.
Sure. Yeah, we've done other studies for sure. We did a state of servers report earlier on in the year, and we were talking to IT professionals about where they purchase their servers. So we saw different trends among where they buy based on the company size. So for smaller companies, they are much more reliant on MSPs than the larger ones, whereas the larger companies tend to go through the channel as well, but they prefer VARs. And then all of them, about half of companies, are still buying direct in some capacity as well. So you can check out that report and tease out some of these trends.
And we appreciate it. And along those lines, maybe the final word would be on my show this morning with Northwest Digital News Tech Tuesday, I focused on the acquisition of Spiceworks by Ziff Davis B2B. So as far as you know, you're not leaving us, man. You're going to keep doing research?
Oh, yeah. We have a lot of research plans coming up next year. We really enjoy doing it because it's a way to bring the voice of IT professionals out and to share with their peers. So if you're working in IT or in the trenches and you want to know what your peers are out there doing, how they're spending, if they're increasing their budgets, what technologies they're looking into, you might think this is something we should look into as well. Or if you see a trend happening in the industry, you don't want to get left behind necessarily. So we like doing these research reports as a way to give back to the community.
All right. Well, thank you, sir, and we'll see you next year.
Yeah, great to see you.